Joanne Rose Flournoy is my name. And just in general, my father was really a workhorse. I mean, this man, he was like the Energizer Bunny, and my mother always called him always in a hurry, Harry, because he just worked constantly. He owned a bakery in my small town of Kingston, New York, along with his brother and 2 other partners. And Dad would get up for work at 3 a.m., go into the bakery so that people could come in the morning and have freshly baked breads and cakes and cookies. You know, the bread would still be warm. And then he would come home around 2 p.m., take a nap for a few hours, get up, have dinner, watch the news, maybe a few shows, drink 1 beer to help him go back to sleep again, and then he would get up at 3 a.m. and do it all over again. He had 1 day off a week. And I do remember, even though he was at the bakery busy, you know, if I wasn't feeling well or if my siblings weren't feeling well, my mother would call my father and say, hey, you know, Joanne's having really bad cramps this month, and she's in the nurse's office. Can you leave work and go pick her up? Because my mother couldn't drive. She was from Brooklyn, New York. She never learned how to drive. The whole idea of driving just really was, you know, foreign to her. But anyway, one story in particular, I do remember this vividly. I was probably a junior in college, and my father and mother were coming to school, a 2-hour drive, to pick me up for winter break. And there was a raging snowstorm, and they still came to get me at school. Blinding snow. So while I'm waiting for them to come, the phone rings in my dorm room, and I pick it up, and it's my sister crying hysterically. And I said, Lenore, calm down, what's going on? She said, oh, I just got a call. Grandpa was in the Hallmark store and he had a heart attack and died. And so anyway, so my parents come in, and I tell my mother this, and she goes, don't tell your father, the weather's really bad. I want his mind on his driving. So we get in the car, and I'm in the back seat. My parents, of course, are in the front seat. Dad's driving home, and I just remember, we even spun out on the road. It was so bad, it was just blinding. So all of a sudden, my father says to me, I can't believe, he's talking to me, he goes, you know, my father's hasn't been feeling well, and you haven't even asked me how he's doing. And I'm like, so I'm thinking, Mom, you know, and I couldn't say, I was like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't say, I was just speechless. And we still had like another hour and a half to go. So, and I do remember when we finally got home, I remember my father walking from the mudroom up into the kitchen, and my mother telling my father, saying, Harry, your father passed away. And my father just crumbled, you know. But, you know, I didn't even have the courage to say, well, now you know why. I didn't ask how he was doing, because I knew. But anyway, that story comes to mind. And I didn't mean to end on a negative note, but he was a great dad. He really was. So I'm finished. Yeah.
Let's see how long you know that you have the floor. Tell us about your father. Memories.
Okay. Dad and Mom met in El Dorado, Kansas. My immediate family is all in Kansas, but Dad he came down to work at Lockheed in 1953 from, where did he work? I don't remember. I can't remember. One of the big airplane manufacturers up there. Yeah, and two of my brothers were born up there, and the next 7 were born here. I'm number 5, 4 older, 4 younger, and I have a lot of memories of Dad. Gosh, the first one that comes to mind is Christmas time, and it was crazy. You know, even when we were young, it was just insane. But anyway, he would put all the kids in the car on Christmas Eve, and take us through the square to look at all the lights. And he'd be playing, you know, Ed Ames or whoever on the radio, and then we would come down Cherokee Street and he'd slow down so we could see the Blair House when they had the lights on the 2 magnolia trees in the front yard. And then he would turn down Chicopee, and of course he was driving very slowly, and it was very painful for all us kids. And he would get to the house, and he would slow down like he's gonna turn in the driveway, but then he would keep going. And just so he could hear us squeal. So he would go around the block at least twice. And while we were all doing that, Mom, and maybe the oldest, Mark, was at home getting all the presents out, you know, to open when we got home. And we always got a new outfit because we always went to midnight mass at St. Joseph. The other kind of funny memory is on Saturday nights, I think there were only 8 kids at this time. Nancy had not been born yet, but on Saturday night, Mom would wash the girls' hair and put curlers in it, and then we would take turns sitting under. You remember the hair dryers that came out of a suitcase?
Yes.
The bonnets. And we have home movies of us sitting there, and we were just probably under 5 years old with this big bonnet on her head. But Daddy was in the kitchen with 8 pairs of shoes, polishing them with the liquid polish. And so by morning, they would all be dry. Well, one particular Saturday night, he either didn't have time or forgot. So the next morning, he's putting liquid polish on all our shoes, and he puts them in the oven to dry. And I remember him putting the shoes on us, and we're going, "Oh, that's hot, Dad!"
Hot feet.
So, but anyway, he was a great dad. He went to law school, has his law degree, but he had 5 kids and 1 on the way, and just couldn't leave the benefits and income from Lockheed. And that's probably one of his regrets. But he was very studious, and he always talked like he was reading from a book. I mean, but he had the 50-yard line tickets at the football stadium for a long time.
Marietta High School?
Marietta High School. And all 9 of us graduated from Marietta. So anyway, I love my daddy.
Oh, Hannah is our youngster of the group, and I'm glad to have you. Hannah, tell us about your dad.
Before I talk about my dad, I want to mention one memory I have of Papa,
Okay.
and that's Betsy's dad, is every time we would go to 402, which is what we called their house, he'd always have like a quarter or a $50 for our birthdays. Because he had 32 plus grandchildren, so but it was always really special to get a $50 from Papa, so I love that memory of him. But I did write down a few of my dad. So I'm a smells person. I think smells trigger memories for a lot of people. So I wrote down that his cologne, he wore English leather. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Yeah. That was his signature scent. I also remember him getting ready for work a lot. When we would visit our dad, he was a mail carrier in Marietta for almost 30 years. And so on Saturdays, he would put on the long socks and the shorts and get his gallon water bottle. And I just remember him putting on a uniform. And I remember admiring that.
Hannah, put it on pulse. What do you have incoming
We
here?
have spaghetti with locally foraged chanterelle mushrooms, local zucchini, and garlic.
Ooh.
Local Georgia extra virgin olive oil.
Excellent.
Yum,
Thank
yum,
you.
yum.
Okay,
Okay,
back to Hannah.
Yes.
You have the floor.
He also told the best bedtime stories. I wrote down a couple of them, but since we're eating, I won't mention them. But one he did tell me a lot about was when he used to work for the YDC. When he was in his early 20s, he would go and catch the runaway children. And
Tell them what that stands for.
oh yeah, YDCU stands for Youth Detention Center. So he always had very interesting stories. I always loved going to, I call it the Marietta Conference Center still, and probably will forever, but the Hilton. We used to go to the daddy-daughter dances there, and before we would go to the daddy-daughter dance, he would take us to Kiefer's.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I loved Kiefer's.
Oh, yeah.
I remember going with my dad to vote on several occasions, and I remember specifically going with him to vote when he ran for city council. He was also the parent that always went on the field trips with you. My mom was a nurse who worked at Kennestone for many years, and then she went to St. Joe's, and she would work, 11A to 11P. So she did that 3 days a week, and so he was always the field trip parent. And two more, and it's kind of piggybacking off of Aunt Betsy, but football games. I remember going to the Marietta High School football games with my dad and Papa and whatever other baloney was available and could fill a seat. We would all go and sit at the 50-yard line, and I always thought that was so fun. And then the last thing I wrote down when I thought about my dad was he was always a gentleman because he always carried a handkerchief. And I will never forget that because there was times when you fall when you're a kid and you cry, and my dad would just pull out his hanky. So that's what I remember and loved about my dad.
Barbara, tell us about your dad.
Okay, this is kind of a two sides of a same coin type thing. One's good and one's bad. When he was married to my mother, he had just gotten out of the Korean War and went to Georgia Tech on the GI Bill. And they had a Ooks, which was me, and they lived in tech housing. And he became an engineer and worked for steel mills. So the earliest memories I have of us are moving to Alabama, Birmingham and Gadsden, where there were mills. And then we moved to New Jersey, where my grandparents were from. And on a side note, my ancestors settled Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and we have a cemetery in the local up there that's on the National Register for historical cemeteries. And you have to prove that you're a descendant of the Coles family to be buried there, which I would never leave the South to do that, but it was just, that was the type of upbringing he had. And he must not have had a very loving childhood, because he did not have a very loving marriage. He was very violent towards my mother, and memories of them I have a lot, but I don't want to share because they're not too nice and it will bring down the house. But they divorced when I was 6 years old, and my mother moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where there was a Navy station, and she decided that she had to get out of there because there were too many sailors and she was sucker for a uniform. So we also tried to get out of his reach because he kind of stalked us after the divorce. But so she got a job at Kennestone Hospital, and that's when we moved here in '67. And after that, he married, and my brother went to live with him for a while. And I remember going to visit him and his new wife, and everything seemed to be pretty normal then. And they divorced soon after, and he married his last wife, who was not going to put up with his shenanigans and kind of straightened him out. And they had a daughter, so I have a half sister. And from then on, feelings and forgiveness was had, and I have fond memories of going to their house for Christmases, and he always made a big production. They would put $100 bill in an envelope for us, and he thought he was the man handing out those envelopes to us, which to us $100 was. And so that is a good memory of him. But he was not the same person then, and I grew to love him. And he eventually got lung cancer. My grandparents moved to Fort Myers, Florida, and a retirement village down there to save their medical expenses. It was one of those places where you combined the medical costs or had some kind of advantage because they didn't want to go poor. And they bought a trailer, and he used to go down there a lot and to check on them. So he was good about checking on my grandparents. And then when he died of lung cancer, and I cannot remember the year, but I still stay in touch with my half-sister who is in Kansas now. She got her doctorate degree in pharmacy from Georgia, and Dillon's, I think, is the name of the chain that is one of Kroger's chains, and she moved out there, so now it's kind of harder to see her. But anyway, I guess the main moral of the story is that started out kind of scary and bad for me, but ended up pretty good.
Ralph, tell us about the members of your father. Assume we know nothing about your dad. Assume that we don't know he's a doctor, so you tell us.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, I didn't really have a lot of time with my dad because he was a pediatrician, as his father was, and he spent almost all the time doctoring all you folks, or some of you folks anyway. And his dad, he was in practice with his dad on Church Street, 680 Church Street. They just built the new emergency room right on top of the old house where his office was.
Wow.
At the corner of Church and Cherry. And I pretty much remember that, and this is probably some of the reason why I don't usually eat dinner till 9 o'clock at night, because he'd be up early in the morning, go make rounds, go to his office, see people at his office. I found some of the bills that they'd given people, and they were like office visit $15 and things like that. And so then he might come home for a short period of time and then talk to the answering service and then return calls. And he'd be sitting there in the kitchen returning calls. And I can just remember, back then you'd have to call collect if you were calling Canton, or it was long distance. And so I remember just Dr. Fowler collect call for whoever it was, and then he'd talk and be, Well, give him a fever bath with tepid water, and I hated tepid water. His solution for a lot of things was a fever bath. And I remember one time he was talking to somebody up in the backwoods of Cherokee County or whatever, and he wasn't real sure that they had a bathtub. And he said, well, you need to give them a fever bath. So you got a bathtub? And the guy said, man, oh man, shower too. So and then he'd go back to the hospital and make rounds again. And sometimes I would go with him and wait in the doctor's lounge or sneak up to the gift shop and buy a donut. And then would go down to the switchboard down in the basement, and I met all the switchboard operators. I worked the switchboard at Kennestone when I was about 12.
That's so sweet.
That's cute.
But Dad, he worked so much, he didn't really have a lot of time to go to go do things and all. As a matter of fact, I got kicked out of Troop 144, Boy Scout troop, because he couldn't go do the chaperone things that parents did. Go into the Okefenokee or anything like that. They made me feel really bad about that, and so I left that. But anyway, he was really into horticulture, wildflowers. When we moved up to Chinquapin Drive, we lived at the big curve up at the top of the hill, and had a pretty large lot. And he had transplanted rhododendron and mountain laurel from the mountains, and the place was just lush. He had beautiful gardens. I don't remember who lives there now, but Peggy Chilton. My mother sold it to the Chiltons.
Oh, the Chilton, Red Chilton.
Chiltmore, as they call it.
She just died.
She just
Right, no,
died.
she did. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Pat Chilton.
Pat Chilton, that's who it was.
95,
Pat.
her obit was in the
It's a
paper.
cross
We
from-
didn't mean to hijack, but we did.
I knew you were talking about her house though, because it's the exact
Oh, it's a
description.
lovely
I
house.
said that must be the same house Pat lived in.
That's where we moved the year I was supposed to go to the junior high on Wright Street. So it was a long walk to walk home.
Very cool house.
I think Kim Gresh lives across the street
She
now in
does.
Campbell Dasher's old house. So anyway, so Dad, but we did occasionally get to go up to a cabin that we had up in Clayton that his brothers and sisters and he inherited from their parents, and we did have some good memories up on Lake Burton the few times he did take vacations. But he was really working all the time. After they got divorced, he moved in, actually. Oh yeah, one of the other things that he did that I remember is that he did not send people to the emergency room unless they were dying. I mean, he just didn't see the reason that to make them go to the emergency room. He would see them at the office. He even had office hours on Sunday morning from 9 to 12.
Wow.
And he'd say, bring them up to the office, nighttime, daytime, whatever it was, see them there, then maybe send them to the emergency room if they really needed to go.
What a great guy.
He was pretty much one of the first doctors around.
Ralph, put it on pause. What's incoming now?
Grilled swordfish
Ooh.
with polenta.
We had this the
and
other day.
beans
Very
and a
good.
strawberry balsamic glaze.
Excellent.
It's so
Strawberries
delicious.
are local.
It
The
tastes-
polenta is actually locally milled.
It tastes like meat. It's so good. And that pasta's to die for, by the way.
It's good too.
Very good.
Please don't die.
I know.
This is a no dying restaurant.
Okay, back to Ralph. Ralph, you have the floor about your dad.
So
He's working.
he wore hiking boots and, flannel shirts and all that kind of stuff when all the other doctors dressed up in suits all the time. So he was just really laid back. After they got divorced, he moved in.
Ralph, what's new incoming?
Margarita pizza.
Margarita pizza, okay. Ralph, back to you. I'm
So
sorry.
these are just the
interrupted.
appetizers.
Oh.
What?
He moved actually into his office.
Ralph's got the floor.
And eventually moved in with my father-in-law. And they had a house up there where that rock yard is on the side of I-75 at Bell's Ferry. I think they're gonna build a giant, I think they're gonna build a giant data center there now. I just saw online, and on that 30 acres.
They are.
So anyhow, then he got remarried to a teacher from East Cobb, and they moved up to the house in Clayton, and I didn't really see him that much any longer. He passed away in 2007, and that's pretty much my memories.
Let's give it up for Ralph. Thanks, Ralph. Pam Cornett Platt, tell us about your dad.
Yeah, you can just shorten it to Pam Cornett now.
Hold the microphone, hold the microphone close to your mouth too.
Okay, all right, my dad, I'll start with the very first thing is to tell you that he was like 6'4", so if you kinda ever wondered why I was so tall. My mother was not tall, so definitely took that after my dad. We're one of those families that moved here when the Bell Bomber thing was happening, and, he had an uncle growing up that, he grew up in Oklahoma, and, he had an uncle that had a cabinet shop, so he and his first cousin, who were the same age, spent a lot of time there, and he just had a natural proclivity for construction and machines, and he really should have gone, my brother went to Georgia Tech, but my dad should have too. He just really had a mind for numbers and calculations and
Is the
lot of that
microphone
kind of
on,
thing.
hon? Is it on?
It is.
Is it? Yeah.
Now, is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
closer.
Well, usually I can project so much, nobody needs to give me a microphone, but anyway. So he came here and helped build the Bell Bomber plant and went to work for, I don't know if any of y'all knew Luda and Charlie Thomas, but he had a construction company. My dad was like, you know, kind of the, I guess the supervisor or whatever. And he was serving on the, Civil Service Board, which is kind of, I guess they kind of interview and do things with the firemen and the police and everything for the city. And he got to make friends, and so, Mr. Rambo, and which is Mark out of our class, and then Laurie's dad, and B.L. Cozy, who had an electrical company. They were seeing what was happening in Cobb County and how construction was like going wild and so forth. And so they came to Dad because they knew all of them. Well, BL did know that he knew the electrical part, but Mr. Crow and Mr. Rambo they didn't know anything necessarily about construction, but they could see that that was a hot thing happening in Cobb County. So they began to talk to Dad, and they kind of were the silent partners, and they all made a construction company called Marietta Construction Company, which ended up doing, I mean, I wish I had paid attention and made a list. My brother and I have talked about trying to drive around Marietta and make a list, but I mean, they did banks, like he was remodeling the bank right across from Atherton's the night that Atherton, you know, blew up, and they did a bunch of schools and, you know, just a lot of things. So anyway, that was his job. But in late years, I'm just gonna quickly touch on this, I've become so much more interested now in learning about what he did during World War II.
Yeah, me too.
Because he was a glider pilot.
Wow.
And I didn't even know what all that involved, and fortunately, before he died, I did get to go to do a few things with him, but I didn't see a glider plane in reality until after he had already died. And after that, I was like, I mean, honestly, y'all, it's like bamboo and paper put together or something. And they're putting tanks and all this equipment, and he was in the South Pacific. So what they would use the glider for is they'd tow it and then let you go, and you would land in the jungle with that equipment, and then he would give salt, and they had things to bribe the natives to help them build an airstrip so that then the other planes could come. And then he had to find his way back to where there was a base or other to get to fly back, because it was kind of like once that plane was crashed, I mean, it didn't have an engine, you couldn't get it to go back.
Glider.
So you just think about that, and so after that, I've done a lot of reading and watched a lot of documentaries and all. It was really fascinating. So
I have a question.
that's the thing.
So was a glider launched from another plane?
Yeah, a glider does not have an engine, and it's pulled, towed
Okay.
by another plane, and then it's released. And they do have, you know, control. Like they have rudders, and things. But yeah, they were. Honestly, if you ever go to, I don't know if any of y'all ever go down where Pensacola and all of that, there's an air museum in there.
Yeah, great naval
that has a
air
glider.
aviation.
And also there's a glider if you ever go to the one in New Orleans, they have one. But I mean, I'm telling you, it flipped me out after that. But So I'll close on this one last thing while we're talking about the war. I went to go see Saving Private Ryan with my dad. And I looked over and he was crying. And he had never told anything except the funny stories about war. You know, he had never told us anything. And that was the first time that I realized that he had seen it. I said, Daddy, you know, you okay? You know what? This made you sad? And he said, yeah, they shouldn't make movies this real. He said,
Oh, wow, that was revealing.
Let's give it up for Pam. Neil Holiday Blake, tell us about your father. And hold the microphone close to your mouth.
We moved here in 1955, I think it was. I don't really remember what the year was, but we were little. I was little. And he moved here to go into practice with Cynthia Coggin's father. So he was internal medicine at the time and then later became a cardiologist. At that time, they didn't specialize in school, but he had a professor, the two of them had a professor in Virginia that had an interest in the heart, and so they became interested.
So he was a doctor?
He was a doctor.
So he was Doc Holliday?
He was Doc Holliday.
Alright.
And down the street was Al Earp. Not Ryan, but Al Earp. Same street. I'm the oldest of five, and back in the days where there was just one telephone per household, you know, the corded phone on the wall in the kitchen. Well, somebody left it off the hook, and I do remember the police coming over, blue lights and the whole bit, to try to get my father because the patients couldn't get a hold of him, or the hospital or somebody couldn't. So yeah, we were in big trouble for leaving the phone off the hook. He managed, I don't know how he did it, because he also got up very early, generally went over to exercise somewhere. He ran, and then he helped start the cardiac rehab at Health Place, and then he would go over and do a 5:30 or 6 o'clock aerobics class. Then he would make rounds at the hospital, and then he would see patients all day. And we ate dinner though every night at 7:30, no matter what. He would be home, and we all ate together. So we grew up eating late, but you know, we were always together, so that was good. I don't particularly remember him missing events, so I think he must have somehow made it to. I wasn't really in. I tried ballet, that was a disaster. I tried, various sports, those were disasters. So I didn't give him lots of opportunities to come. But one of the things I remember most about my father was, you know, Matt always, when he introduced me, he says, "This is Neil. She was smart in high school." Well, the smartest thing Neil ever did was enlist her father's help, and there were a group of dads who helped. So when we would have a tough math problem, particularly a math problem, you know, it'd be like, I would call Allison Ray and say, "Did you get the answer to whatever?" And she'd go, "No, but Dad figured it out." But if her dad couldn't figure it out, so we'd get my dad, her dad, Kay Armitage's dad. Between the dads and then the three girls, we would eventually get almost every homework problem correct. And the dads taught us how they did it, so it was like having, you know, a private tutor for those hard problems. So yeah, really, I was not smart at all, but I was smart enough to enlist some help. So there you go.
That's great.
Anyway, those are my main memories. He was a good speaker. He had a dry wit, and he was often called to speak at functions, Rotary clubs and church functions and whatever. And the thing I remember about one of the ones he would say is, "Yeah, well, this church is here on Church Street, which is appropriately named. It's also known as the Church of the Quick and the Dead, because if you're not quick, you will be dead crossing Church Street to get into the church." So anyway, those are great memories of Dad. He also loved flowers and botany, and he took me around the yard and would identify the plants, and then I'd go back and identify them to him. So that started my love of plants and why I majored in forestry. So here we go.
Let's give it up for Neil. Does anybody, Greg, does anybody need anything to drink? You can have alcohol too, if you want wine or beer, we're not judging, okay? I'm a Baptist, but I'm not judging today and Saturday.
I'm taking home some of that pasta.
Yeah, and-
Anybody else?
The food that's not eaten will be
Yeah.
thrown away unless you take it home.
That
So
pasta's
it's-
too good to go to waste.
Yeah, now, Jim Lofton, you have the floor, tell us about your dad, your memories.
Well, you can appreciate this, Matt. My dad was Navy. He started out in the Army Air Corps.
Thank you.
And that was kind of a competitive thing. And at the time that he enlisted, all of the services were kind of listening out for who was not going to do this. Well, we got a job for you. And he kind of got into that thing to where the Navy offered him a job. We need a mechanic, but we need him to go to the Pacific. So he wound up floating around the Pacific, getting shot at and whatever, working on airplanes. Made good use of the GI Bill. He and my mom got married in 1947 and moved into a new house that they built for the purpose, right next to the Naval Air Station Atlanta, which at the time was actually Piastra DeKalb Airport, what it is now. And so I grew up, that was my play area where I went and rode my bike and rode around. And at the time, they didn't think anything about kids riding around where there was airplanes and stuff like that's no big deal, you know. So I got kind of an early introduction to that. Remarkably, my dad, he embraced me as a close friend when I was little and in the way. He took me everywhere. If he went to the bank to do business for my grandmother or whoever like that, he took me with him. And he introduced me to people and forced me to interact with adults. So as a kid, I grew up more around adults than children because I'm an only child and I just had cousins that I saw on the weekends, so whatever. Daddy, just like you guys have said about your dads, our dads went to school. They knew math. They knew all this stuff because they had to. That's a necessity. It's not a matter of whether you're going to pass math class and get whatever you're going to do it. And one of the things I really wish I could have taken more advantage of, my dad said, I want you to do all your schoolwork on your own. But if you come up against a math problem, a logic problem, or a science problem that you're befuddled by, don't get frustrated and don't waste a lot of time being frustrated about it. Come to me, I'll show you how to do it. I may show you an easier way to do it than what's in the book. And if I don't have the answer right off the bat, we'll find it together.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know, and so maybe I took that a little too seriously because I was like, well, okay, I got something to fall back on. And so I went on through my dumb kid life, kind of jumping from thing to the next easy thing. Well, I wish I'd taken it more seriously because anyway, Daddy was he was an engineer, scientist, not a degreed engineer, but a practical engineer. He built stuff, designed stuff. I've still got drawings all over the place with his recognizable handwriting of benches. He made an articulating ramp to balance, to use weight and balance to load a 800-pound lawnmower into the back of a half-ton pickup truck without having to shove and push and hurt yourself.
Wow.
Did lots of neat stuff like that. One particular thing, and if I could have put this together, I would have brought it as a demonstration. In our old workshop, we lived in Chamblee. I was up there watching my dad, and watching him doing stuff, and he was building something. And so I'm looking around amongst his junk pile and his tools and whatever. And I started getting wires and little pieces of gears and whatever I could find, and I'm all putting them in a can, and I'm looking at him and thinking about him. He finally looks at me like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I want to build an electric motor." And my dad's like, and you can see the light bulb come on in his head. He's like, opportunity knocks. So he says, let's see if we can do one together. And this is maybe when I'm in the first grade, second grade, somewhere there. And so he says, give me a minute, we'll get back to this in a little while. I'm gonna get some things together because I want you to understand what we do when we do this. Okay, so I'll go cool my heels. he's ready to put this thing together. He's got a little block of wood, and he's got a broken V-shaped magnet that was part of a magneto from an old Ford, like a Model T Ford, where they had magnets on the flywheel that made the sparks for the engine. He had a piece of that, and he had various hardware and some enameled wire. Well, he built this thing, and I helped him. I want more watch than anything, but he mounted this little V-shaped magnet on the top of the wooden block, made an aluminum standoff, a U-shaped standoff, and an axle with a carriage bolt, and he polished it so it would spin freely. Drove the carriage bolt through a piece of rebar, I think he drilled. In any case, the rebar got wrapped with something used for like wax paper or whatever used for insulation. Oh, electrical tape, just plain old electrical tape. And he wound an armature for this thing. We got to the point where it was time to make brushes for it. Well, he used the enameled wire to make brushes. And the whole time he's doing it, he's explaining to me the basic principle of electric motors, and that is you're attracting and repelling magnetic fields, and you change the polarity of the magnetic fields by some kind of a switching device, whether it's alternating current or whether you've got a commutator like a DC motor. We built a DC motor that ran off a 3-volt battery, flashlight battery. I still have it.
Really?
I don't think you have anything to regret. It looks like you learned a lot.
Well, my dad, that was the way my dad, he shared everything with me, shared photography with me. We were almost late today because we've been watching ever since.
A couple months.
Yeah, a couple of months. There's red-tailed hawks that built a nest in the neighbor's tree, and it's inside of our back porch where I sit out and drink coffee. And 110 feet away, there's something going on in Hawkville, and I've been fascinated. I'm like, I know those babies are about to fledge. Dang it, I know they're going to do it while I'm going to the hardware store, or the Kroger, or sitting in traffic. Something. The drama will happen then. Well, it happened this morning at about 11 o'clock. The neighbor called and told her, hey, tell Jim that one of the hawks.
She asked me if I wanted, I'm hijacking for just a second.
You got, yeah.
But it's on point.
She asked if we wanted to have a hawk lunch.
Oh, yeah, a hawk. Well, is that, oh, okay. I didn't.
That's what she said.
See, I was busy doing something. I was supposed to get ready to take a shower to come here. Anyway, so she said, Mama Hawk swooped down on the porch. We got a nature cam out there. The sun said, anyway. So she says, I think one of the babies is out here. So I look out the window, like, sure enough, there's baby hawk on the back porch looking around all confused. So I snatched the camera, ran next door, and I'm looking out the window, I'm thinking, I don't want to encounter mom, but the baby's got a problem. Well, baby, always huge backyard where there's grass and neat stuff, good place for a hawk to land. Of all the stupid places for the hawk to land, it lands on this porch. And it's looking around the porch, and it's like a jail, there's banisters and all, and little baby doesn't know what to do. Mom keeps flying down to the banister going, hey, here, no, this way, no. Mom's flying back and forth and back and forth. So I'm taking pictures of them, and I'm like, I guess I'm gonna have to intervene. So I went out and I kind of chased the baby out of the corner, and I chased it down to the stairs until it finally kind of went flop down the stairs. Like, okay, Mom, it's on you. I'm out of here. So anyway, I took a bunch of pictures of all that, and I was like, I'm recording this one way or another, even if we're late, and we wound up getting here on time. I'll try to have those pictures, if what I can make of them that are worth seeing.
Are you on Facebook?
I'll try to bring them next time.
Bring the electric motor.
Oh, yeah, I want to see
I need to
that.
borrow that electric motor.
The motor. We want to see the motor.
Yeah.
I'll bring the motor. If I can find a battery that'll work it, I'll make it.
Very cool.
Are you on the class of 72, that thing we did for the reunion?
Private Facebook page.
I am.
She is.
Yeah, put the pictures of the home.
Yeah, I want to see that
this home.
on Facebook.
Well, okay, I'll try to bring you pictures of the hawk and
Well,
I'll bring it.
we'll download it to the computer and then I'll try to put it on Facebook like I did the pictures from the reunion.
Well, my technical expertise does not include that. I'm still lost.
That's why he had a There was a reason.
I'm still lost with the thing about how do you compress JPEG images so that you can send somebody 50 pictures in it.
But your father would know how to do it.
Yeah.
Well, he would have figured it out.
He would have figured it out.
figured it out.
He would have.
Okay, that's my dad. James
Yay.
Arnold Lawson Jr.
That's
Wonderful.
Barbara Lawson, tell us about your dad.
My dad, like a lot of girls, was my hero. I just gotta say that from the beginning.
Hold it close to your mouth.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
He is my hero. He was born in Germany, and they moved when he was under 10 years old, I think, to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was the youngest. The next oldest was 20 years older, my Aunt Mimi. And he was popular in high school. He was a swimmer, and he played football. He ended up getting a scholarship for football, and never graduated from engineering because of the war. But prior to that, he'd seen my mom selling tickets at a movie theater in Milwaukee, and was like, you know, and I mean, he's told this story before. Anyway, so they got married, and right after that, Daddy went to war. He was in the European theater as an engineer, and meanwhile, Mom moved with her parents to California. So when he came back from the war, they lived in California, Pasadena, and tried to have kids, but couldn't, so they adopted my brother and I.
Oh.
So I was adopted at just a couple weeks old. And then when we were 1, he'd been working, he started at Lockheed in Burbank in 51, I believe, and then got transferred to Marietta in 61, and was here ever since. He worked there for 37 years, until that stock market crash, if y'all remember, in 87, I think it was, Black Monday. And back at that time, the way you cashed out of your savings plan at Lockheed, it was the value of the end of the prior month. So, you know, people are looking at $80,000 loss, I'm gonna retire. And, you know, so he did, a lot of people did. And, but prior to that, you know, he was my hero because he made sure I had routing lessons when I wanted them. He came to every horse show. You know, he was always there. And I went to Georgia, made them unhappy because I didn't do very well, and got married too early. And okay, long story short, I ended up transferring to Georgia State, and decided in accounting because I wanted to be an engineer just like him, you know, my hero. And calculus-based physics just didn't do it for me. No, it wasn't happening, but I still like numbers. I thought, well, what about accounting? So then there was a sign in the accounting building that Lockheed was looking for finance co-ops. And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. So I applied and I got in. Was a co-op for 2 years and then went full-time. But during those 2 years as a co-op, and until he ended up, anyway, we rode to work together. I lived in Alpharetta, and I drove to the homestead in Roswell, and we would ride to work together and back. So we got really, really close as adults. You know, I was still Daddy's little girl, you know, but it was just an amazing. I don't know. Looking back, I'm just like, I could not have had, it was perfect. It was perfect. I even turned him on to the Kinks. Yeah, because I got to pick the music.
Oh, great.
And anyway, I know I made him very, very proud in the end, and he told me that quite a few times.
Barbara, did he ever lose his German accent?
Oh, he didn't have one.
Oh, he didn't? Because
No.
my father never lost his.
Well, he was only like 8 to 10 probably when he came here.
Yeah.
And now my Aunt Mimi, she still had a German accent. Yeah. She was 20 years older. I'd never met his older sister, Irene, who my middle name is, because she passed before they adopted me. But,
Were you a twin?
was I a twin? No.
Okay, I heard you say when we were 1. So.
Right, yeah.
Did I say we? Oh,
yeah.
When I was 1.
Okay.
My brother's a year and a half older than
Is
me.
he your biological brother?
No, he's not.
Okay.
No, and I've never, I looked a little bit, you know, I filled out something on one of those sites but nothing ever came of it, and I didn't really go any further because I had great parents. We clashed. I was a teenager in the 70s, so you can just imagine.
That's normal, very normal.
Yeah, I was like a lot of other people, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Give it up for Ken, tell us about your dad.
My dad, he was an engineer on trains, worked in Atlanta, and go back to the first, when I was 6 years old, just starting school, they don't do a lot of stuff. Well, when I was 7, I'd bring home my work and stuff would be missing. And the teacher noticed I was going. And so we went to the post office, and the lady that gave me my eye test said that, I said, Daddy, that's the one that gave me my eye test. And said, yes, you failed it. The next day, you can't do that now. The next day, I was in getting my eyes checked. And they dilated my eyes. I did not know what that meant. So I was looking in the magazine. I said, they weren't my eyes. They did something to me. So, of course, I got glasses, hated them. And I'd leave home without them. Forgot them, I totally forgot them. And, but that was my eyes getting checked. So a little bit later, I was in the Boy Scouts, and we was going up to Vogel State Park. Well, Daddy was always the type, I'm going to have more food than we need. We're not going to run out of food. So this little boy was riding with us. His name was Jackie, and he couldn't speak real plain. And he said, Mr. Argo, I need to go to the bathroom. And Daddy said, well, we can't stop. He said, I'll just hold you out the window.
Oh no, he was kidding.
But he did not know this. And Daddy said, I'll just hold you out the window and you can use the restroom. And he said, Mr. Argo, please don't hold me out the window.
That's cute.
And then later on, my daddy wrote the rule. He did not graduate from high school. I think he stopped in the 7th or 8th grade. Had to go to work. And but he wrote the rules for the railroad. Well, Daddy was off, and they put a kid in there over him. And Daddy hated that. Well, he said, all right, Mr. Argo, I'm going to take you out of commission. You can go back there and go to sleep. I'll be glad to. Went back there to go to sleep. Got into Atlanta. He said, all right, Mr. Argo, you can go home. Be glad to. Went home, went to bed. The boss man came in, asking, where's Argo at? And the kid said, I seen him home. You did what? You can't do that. So at that time, we did not have a telephone. So the boss drove from Atlanta, drove in our driveway, knocked on the door. Daddy pulled the blinds back and pulled them.
No.
Did not go to answer. He said, doggone you, Argo. So Daddy drives in Monday to go to work. He had been on triple time the whole time. When he left, I think it was Kentucky, he had been on triple time. And without clocking out, he said, he sent me home. So he said, "You fool, you sent him home on triple time." And he did not answer the door when I got there. And that was really the fun part of my daddy.
So he got paid, even though he.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am, he got
triple-
paid.
triple
Got a
pay.
big check. But because that kid sent him home, and he said, the boss man told him, "You cannot do that." He said, "He's the one that wrote the rules."
Kid learned something that day.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Ken?
Yeah.
Carol, tell us about your dad.
Hey, my dad was born and raised in Cobb County. Never went further than Marietta down on Powder Springs Street across from the Hilton.
Okay, go ahead. He's just
okay.
handing out spoons.
Okay.
Well, I thought you wanted to announce that he was.
Yeah, he's
And
handing out spoons.
they did a lot of farming, and he was the oldest of 4 boys. And he has told the story many times. Him and my uncle were out plowing, behind the mule, and going row by row. And Daddy said he stopped and he thought, this is it. So he went to my uncle and he said, "Take the mule back to the barn when you go." He said, "I'm gone." And he walked off and somehow got a job with an organization at that time called the CCs. And they built roads. And he built a bunch of roads up in Clayton County, up in the mountains, and then had the opportunity to go out west and build roads. And my grandmother, since he was only 17, my grandmother had to sign for him. So she signed, and he went out to Oregon and Washington, built roads, fought forest fires. He'd done that for a good 2 years. Came back here, and him and some friends were riding bicycles around the square. And it was him and 2 friends, and they saw 3 young ladies riding their bicycles. And one of those ladies is my mother. And so the boys got together and they said, "Okay, we're gonna propose to her." And so they all agreed, we're gonna propose. Well, come proposal time, Daddy was the only one that actually proposed. The other 2, they chickened out. So he was 21. My mother was 14, and they got married.
Wow.
They went to a judge's house on Maple Avenue, right across the street from the church, and got married. That was in November, and my dad left for the war in December and was gone for 4 years. And when he came back, he worked in several different other places, but then he started working for Southeastern Elevator Company. And of course, at that time, I didn't realize, where exactly in Atlanta it was, but it was across the street from Oakland Cemetery.
Sure.
And talking about riding back and forth to work, when I graduated high school, I got a job at Sears on Ponce de Leon, and me and Daddy rode back and forth together. So I would drop him off and go over to Sears, drove down Boulevard, and then when I got off, I would go back around and pick him up, and then we would come home together. And then he done that for several years, and to this day, when I get in an elevator, I look to see who made it. Because Daddy worked for Southeastern Elevator. And then he went to work where he retired from was Tug Manufacturing, and the little white tractors that pulls the baggage carts at the airport and backs the planes out. He built those. They were made right over there in the industrial park near the Coca-Cola plant. And he worked there for several years, and that's where he retired from. And unfortunately, cancer came to call, but he survived prostate and bladder cancer. And Then unfortunately, Alzheimer's came to visit, which to me, and I've talked with Bonnie about it.
Carol, put it on pause. What incoming dessert do you have for us?
Chocolate peanut butter panna cotta.
Now, did you buy that at the store, or did you make that?
Oh, I make everything here.
Wow.
What is that Kroger bill that just
The ingredients.
It's food line, food line.
Okay, Carol, back to you.
Okay, to me, Alzheimer's is worse than any other disease there
You can't
is.
fix it, right?
And they're there physically,
Yeah,
but they're gone.
yeah.
I know the day, I thought I was gonna do this.
Oh,
The day we were sitting in the den together, and Mama had a picture of him on the TV. And he looked at me and he said, "Who is that?" And I said, "That's you." "No, it is not." And I thought, I don't need a dog's fit on my hands right now. So I said, "Let me look at it." So I pretended to get up close and look at it. I said, "I know what that is. That's a friend of ours. His name is Bill. And he is the nicest person." He said, "Oh, okay."
there you go.
And that was the end of it, you
So
know.
sweet.
But, of course, to me, he was the smartest man, the funniest man. But one thing he said to Ken's mother one day, and it took me forever to figure it out, but when I did, I thought, that makes sense. But he was talking to her, he said, "Well, I may have been cut out to be a farmer, but I was sewed up wrong." And I thought, what does he mean? And then one day it just dawned on me, a pattern, like you were gonna make a dress.
Absolutely.
You cut the pattern out,
And sew it.
and then you sew it together. So, but he left the farm and he said, "No, this is not for me." So,
Smart.
but he's been gone a long time. Of course, to some people it would think, well, that was the other day, and to me it's been 100 years.
Is your mother still alive?
Yes, lives by
How
herself.
old was she when she had her first child?
Oh goodness, she was in her 20s because Daddy was gone for 4 years, and then I think it was another 3 or 4 before
So
they
she
had-
wasn't a child having a
No, no, oh no.
But you think about that, she was 14, and when he came back, she was still only 18.
Yeah.
And he had been gone 4 years.
Years.
I mean, golly, as a teenager, that
So,
was.
They had to get to know each other
all over
Well,
again.
how did her parents feel about her getting married at 14? Were they okay with it?
Well, evidently so, because, my grandmother signed, and my grandfather had unfortunately already passed away, and it was just her and her mother. There were other children, but they were already married and having children.
Okay.
Because Mama had a nephew that was older than her.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, so,
Interesting.
but he was one of a kind. I'll just say that. I'm
Sounds like
finished.
Let's give it up to Carol. Bonnie, tell us about your dad.
My dad was born in West Virginia and came to Atlanta when he was in the Army. Met my mother at church, and they were married in Atlanta. Let's see. I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister. And when I was 6 years old, my parents divorced. Now, I have to tell you this. My father was an extremely eccentric man. And I excuse me, as I grew up, I remember one time saying to my mother, "I don't know how you stayed with him as long as you did." Because he was just so particular about the weirdest things. And so, anyway, but we lived with my mother for about 3 years, and then we had always spent weekends and summers with Daddy. And back when, I guess, when I was 9.
Bonnie, a little bit closer to the microphone in your mouth.
Okay,
Thank you.
when I was 9, we'd spent the summer with Daddy, and that was the summer that they were really having a lot of race issues in Atlanta. And so, and at that time we lived in Atlanta with Mama. So at the end of that summer, my mother did the best thing she ever did for us was to give custody to Daddy so that we stayed in Cobb County and we didn't have the race tension that was going on in Atlanta. So that's when I started at Hickory Hills, and then I went to West Side. I went to the Wright Street first year of Marietta Middle School, and then of course went to Marietta High School. Like I said, my father was an eccentric. My brother could do no wrong, but if he did something wrong and he wasn't home yet, Daddy would just go off the handle to me and my sister, so that by the time Warren got home, he was all calmed down.
Oh.
Now, son, you know you shouldn't do that. And I'm thinking,
what's going on?
My father worked for Lockheed, and he worked for the Southern Company, and finally started working for OSHA. He was a grammatical genius, and it came down to all of us too. But what his job was is he needed to know all the technical stuff. He was an engineer, he graduated from Georgia Tech. He knew all the technical stuff, but then he was the one who would proofread everybody's written work to make sure that it was not only technically correct, but that it was grammatically correct.
Like a technical writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
That's interesting.
but he did not enjoy reading for recreation. He would read the newspaper, but that's just about it.
It was like work to him.
Yeah, I guess it was like work to him.
Yeah.
Let's see, I was gonna tell you something about Daddy. Daddy, he lived until 1999. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's probably in 95.
He's young.
And he was in his middle 70s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
mhm. He they told us when he was, we were talking to one of the nurses one time, and she was telling us, she said, now what you can expect is this. She said, whatever personality traits a person has, Alzheimer's will magnify something. She said, if it's a bad thing, it's just gonna get worse. She said, but if it's a good thing, then, and my father always had a very sweet attitude about most everything. And so he just got nicer and more compliant. We were very blessed.
Yes.
And, I miss him to this day. I'm trying to think, there was something else I was going to tell you about him. Oh, he was a woodworker. And he loved, it took him forever to do something, but he did it to perfection. When his high school, his 50th high school reunion was coming up for St. Albans High School in West Virginia, he made enough, of course his high school class was not nearly as big as ours, but he made these little wooden SAHS 50 little wooden stand things, and he hand cut them all, and I mean it was a beautiful thing, and he made one for everybody in his class.
Some families may even still have.
They still have. I have, at my house, I have a shelf that he built for a double window that I had in my kitchen. Shortly after we moved in, I told him, I said, I would like to have a shelf over those two windows so that I could, put things up there. And so he measured it, and it took him several months, but he brought it to my house one day when we were having dinner or something, and that thing fit exactly on the upper sill of that window. It didn't need any attachment at all. It fit right on there. And a lot of you know that I'm a needle worker, and I do collect thimbles of different kinds. And I told him I wanted a thimble case for some of my really nice thimbles. And he said, well, what are you looking for? And I said, like a wooden base with a glass, like what you'd have on an antique clock. I said, and little posts made of like lucite or something to put them on so that there would be sort of like a spiral. He created that thing. And luckily he signed the bottom of it. He had like a little wood burning thing, and he signed the bottom of it. So I really have some very good memories of my dad. My dad raised us, the three of us, by himself. Since I was in the 4th grade, and we all turned out pretty good, I think.
We agree.
When we were cleaning out Daddy's house, we found he was a pack rat, seriously a pack rat, and we found some letters that he had received from his sisters. He had 5 sisters. His parents had 5 girls and then 4 boys.
Wow.
So his sisters were all older than him, and 2 of them lived in California at this time of this letter, which was right around the time Mom and Daddy divorced. And she had written to him she said, don't put up with what you're having to put up with. I want you to come out here and live with us. We can get you a job. You can live with us until you find your own place. And she wanted him to start over again, and he would not leave his children.
Of course not.
And so I am most blessed that I had a father who was committed to being a father to his children.
Very much.
Sandra, tell us about your dad.
My dad was born in,
Closer to your mouth.
my father was born in Fort Worth, Texas area. He ended up here finally in Marietta when he went to work for Bell Bonner. And we were his second family. So I had very much older half brothers and a half sister, which we had the opportunity to meet on several occasions. But anyway, I didn't have my dad very long, but of the memories, they were all great memories. And one of the first memories I had, maybe I was just 3 years old. When he'd go get his hair cut, he would say, "Come on, go with me, get your boots on," and I'd get to go and sit in that big old chair that they had in the barber shop and get my boots polished. So I pretty much loved to go and be with him and do whatever. He was very much involved in all of our lives. They were very much, both parents, very much just family oriented. When I was about 5 years old, he was a coach in the pony league, and I think it was for the Rotary, whatever. And I got to be the Batgirl, and I had my own little uniform and all. But it was a nice bonding time with him and my brother, because he was on the baseball team, and I was at Tump Thumb Nursery at the time. So not only that, he'd drive me in when he'd go to work at Lockheed, and which gave us that time. And a lot of times we'd stop and get breakfast, and my mother didn't want to get up and fix breakfast. But anyway, so I got to do that, and I can remember him. He would. First of all, I remember the first time I ran out on the field, the gasp. So I'm saying I was probably the first Batgirl.
Wow. Which part did y'all play at?
It's up there, I think it was called Custer Field, up where the buses are up behind there and all. And so he would say to me, and I'm 5 years old, okay? But I could throw a ball, I could catch a ball, I could hit a ball. And he made me feel like, did you bring your glove in so you could warm up the pitcher? And then I guess I got my love for animals from him. My mother didn't dislike animals, but she had the responsibility of caring for my dad and us kids and all. We had stopped at W.T. Grant in East Marietta Shopping Center, and we were all together. Don't remember why, but while my mother was shopping, he somehow found the pet part of it, and I'm going from memory. And so, there was a monkey there.
Oh, no.
So they had a monkey in there, and he stuck his hand in, and the monkey bonded with him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we got home, and, you know, my mother said, oh, my golly, he went back and got that monkey.
Oh!
Did you see that still in middle school? Cause I feel like I remember something.
No. That monkey lasted about a year before my mother decided she wasn't gonna keep having to clean the curtains. As little kids, we'd let the monkey loose. And
What kind of monkey was it?
It wasn't really a spider monkey. It was something smaller than that. His name was Charlie.
Charlie.
And he would come home at night from Lockheed. He loved to read. He self-taught. He had high IQ according to my mother, but he didn't finish high school. He got like a GED, but he learned everything. He read everything. He learned his math and all that stuff. And I remember he'd come home, and after dinner, Mom would always have dinner ready, of course. He'd sit in his chair, which I still have, and get his little book, whatever. He was reading paperback books. And he'd get that monkey, and that monkey he'd stick down in his flannel shirt, and that monkey would go to sleep. So I'll give him credit for my love for it.
Was he heartbroken when y'all had to give it away?
Well, I'm sure he was gonna miss Charlie, but it probably went better that my mother didn't have to keep cleaning up after him. But anyway, because we lived out in East Marietta, there when it was country, and had the run of. We rented the place, but had the run of the woods and everything and all. We had, they had horses, which they had one there that we could ride. But anyway, and I can for my birthday, I always wanted to go, we always did something, but my favorite place was to go up there on Blackjack Mountain. And they had horses up there, and for my birthday, we would ride the horses. I almost got my father, he was convinced, I think, that he was gonna get me a pony. My mother nixed that, but that's okay, that's okay. But anyway, and then as we progressed on, he was very much, he liked photography, and he had rigged up a dark room in the house, and he was always taking pictures of us kids, and, you know, getting us all dressed up, whatever, and of a family and stuff like that. And so things that were in school, he would document it with his camera when we were in plays and all that stuff. But my parents, they didn't go any place off. They wouldn't go out without us kids, but if there was a PTA meeting or something where kids weren't supposed to be there, then we'd get a babysitter. And then, as I got older, I guess it was 9. Yeah, I was 9, and he had started going to fishing. He went to Reeves Lake. I never knew that till we moved into town, and I saw the sign over there on Powder Springs Street. But you know, I guess he said, "I want to go fishing with you," and he says, "Well." You know, at 9, says he wasn't gonna take us till we learned how to cast and all that. So he went and got my sister and myself these little rods, and we'd stand out in the backyard, which is big. And until we could learn to cast that, he wasn't gonna take us. And the first trip that we went as a family, and I think my brother went, who's 8 years older, with us that time. But he was only gonna take one of us out at a time in the boat. And my sister went first, and all of a sudden, storm came up, and they're out on the lake, and I mean, it's just pouring rain. And we keep looking for him to get back in, and it took a while. He had to get out of the boat and swim and pull the boat. It was just pouring that hard. But to say the least, my sister never went fishing again. And my brother was there. He never got the opportunity in the boat either. But anyway, he didn't go. but I'd love to go fishing with him. And most of that summer, we went, and that Sunday before Labor Day, we had gone to Reeves Lake, and I can remember him saying, when we stopped, I remember we stopped at East Marietta shopping center at the I think it was the Dunaway store, and then got ice cream or whatever, and he was talking about found another place for us to go try it out, another lake.
Lauren Smith Sinclair.
I'm sorry.
That was your dad calling, by the way.
I'm sure he's probably doing that, but anyway, we stopped there, and we never got to go fishing because he passed away that Labor Day.
So you were young when he
I was 9, yeah, and he had a massive heart attack.
Oh my
And it was, you know, I've only been hysterical twice. That was one.
Oh.
And when I pitched a fit, get a hamster. But other than that, but I'm just so happy that I had the parents that I had.
Did your mama not start teaching till after he died?
No, she was teaching, and because I can remember she taught at Eastside Elementary School, and that's when I got shipped to kindergarten and 10th and nursery and all. And then she got Steve had already paid the tuition to go to Marietta High School, and Louise White says, "Why don't you come and apply at Marietta?" So I can remember looking at homes. They were thinking about moving into town because Daddy was working at Lockheed and Mom was teaching it. So I can remember going when we moved to town, when we went to Hickory Hills, I could remember us looking at houses up there because I remember looking over and seeing the school down there. So,
but you always went to school with your mom then, like you went to Eastside when she was there.
I did not. She taught my brother at Eastside, and then Karen and I both went to Hickory Hills, and then for whatever reason, I guess it was overcrowded, she went to Westside School and had my mother as a teacher at Westside. And then when they did the middle school, started the concept of middle school, and I went to Wright Street in the 8th grade, and I had my mother as a teacher. So she taught all three of us. What are the odds?
Really?
Just think
What
about
was your
it.
mother's
That was
name?
junior high back then, though.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She taught
Donna
social
Johnson.
Hello. My name is Matt Flournoy. I have wonderful memories of my father. His name was Bobby. Growing up, his mother, he was an only child. He grew up in the Buckhead area, went to E. Rivers Elementary School in Atlanta, and then went to North Fulton High School, then went to Emory undergraduate, then Georgia Law School. And like I said, he was an only child, and he was spoiled. His mother, my grandmother, thought he could do no wrong, and it was a big mistake to move to the country called Marietta from Atlanta because he was destined to be the governor of Georgia. I mean, she really had high expectations. And but he was a very good father, lousy husband though. You wouldn't want to be married to him, but he's excelled at being. And I remember growing up, and he would talk about his work at the dinner table, about a case that he was trying, a criminal case or a civil case, a car wreck case, a zoning case. And so we listened, and it was very fascinating. And I think that he never said, "Matt, I want you to be a lawyer," but it's just a natural thing that, and he, when I was in 18 after my graduating from high school, I worked up at his law office running titles at the courthouse. I learned about quit claim deeds, warranty deeds, about chain of title. It worked out very nicely, learning about the real estate industry. And but he was very loving, and he was very proud of me. He was very proud that I went to Princeton. It's interesting, the concept. It's like my father had been admitted to Princeton, like they were like, "Oh, my son is going to Princeton," and my grandmother was so proud too. It's like, anyway, I want to stay focused on my dad, but anyway, he was a lawyer here in town, and he became a judge, a Superior Court judge, but before that, he served in the State House of Representatives in the 60s, making the laws, remember, and then he was mayor of Marietta, and then he was a judge, so he served in all three branches of government. First the legislative, the executive, and then the judiciary. So anyway, but he was a very good father, very generous financially, never had to worry about money. I didn't have to apply for loans or scholarships. Now, if I had come from a less affluent family, I would have had to play football to work my way through college, but that was not an issue. I could afford it. I didn't have to apply for loans or anything, so my parents paid for my education, which is a wonderful thing. He loved growing up in Buckhead. He had ponies, and he always had a little pony. And when we up at Lake Allatoona, we had a cabin up there at Victoria Landing, and there were horses. He bought horses, and we rode horses all the time. And so he kind of, his love of ponies, and ponies can be mean, they'll bite you too, but horses were not as mean. And my parents got divorced when I was about 18 years of age, and they needed to get divorced. It was like nitro and glycerin together. I mean, they functioned better apart. So people say, oh, you're from a broken family. I said, no, we wanted our parents to get divorced. And we said, yeah, good. We didn't want them to get back together. And so he remarried. I like my stepmother, but and so anyway, anything you'd like to add?
Tell the story about going to Lester Maddox's house.
It's
an adventure, though. Just tell the fact. It's so cute. It's a good story.
Okay, this is kind of long-winded. At Westminster, I was running for the president of the student body, the boys' student body. It was a boys' school and girls' school, and we had my opponent, Kevin Kaufman, who also went to Princeton, accused me of being a liar, that I had actually called up Lester Maddox's office and arranged, his office promised to come and speak to our assembly. And we were looking for controversial speakers, and boy, he was controversial in like 1970, 71. And so anyway, my opponent called the office, and the person didn't know anything about me, so he said, Matt Flournoy said he's talked to Lester Maddox's office, this is a lie and stuff. And so I came home and I told my dad, and he said, now this is like 2 days before the election. So he had served in the State House of Representatives, and he knew Lester Maddox. So Lester had been out someplace, he was in his home in East Cobb. He lives in East Cobb. And we went out there, and it was like 9 o'clock, and Dad took a picture of me shaking hands with Lester Maddox in a handwritten letter. He said, I would be delighted to come to Westminster Schools and speak at your assembly. So we made big posters, put it all around the school, and I won the election. So that's what, but no, he's been very helpful. And being a lawyer, it does help having a father who's a judge in the same circuit where you practice, and also both. So that helped a lot. I mean, nothing illegal about it. It was just that I had street credibility, and when I worked at my father's office before I was a lawyer, I would go into the courtroom and sit and listen to the different cases, and I'd see the good lawyers, the bad lawyers, the pro se litigants, and it was a wonderful experience. Kind of like being a medical doctor and going, have a medical doctor as a father and going to the hospital with him and stuff. And so I really enjoyed it, and it was a perfect fit. I'm so glad I went to law school and practiced law, and I needed to be a lawyer. I would not want to be anything else, especially a medical doctor, because and we talked about money at our dinner table. I knew how much this guy made, how much a doctor made, how much a lawyer made. I mean, some people, oh, you don't talk about money. Health, yeah, we talk about money all the time. Because you need to know how much a car costs, how much an education costs. I mean, it wasn't forbidden, because he wanted to educate the children to know what the facts of life were. So I'm glad for it, really. So anyway, I'm finished.